Everyone expected a scene. They expected tears, screaming, perhaps even a faint. After all, Justin Wycliffe wasn't just breaking an engagement. He was destroying Genevieve's life in front of the entire town of Oakhaven. But Genevieve did the one thing that terrified them more than a scream. She remained completely silent. She simply took off her ring, placed it on the table, and walked out into the freezing rain. Justin laughed, thinking she was walking toward destitution. He didn't know that 10 minutes later the most feared carriage in England, bearing the crest of the Duke of Ashworth, would pull up to the curb, and the woman he discarded would be bowed into it by a royal footman. Justin had just thrown away a diamond to pick up a stone, and the payback was about to be legendary. The clock on the mantel of Wycliffe Manor struck 6, the sound reverberating through the drawing room like a death knell. Outside, the October rain lashed against the window panes of Oakhaven, a small but wealthy parish in the north of England. Inside, the air was suffocatingly warm, scented with expensive tobacco, and the cloying perfume of Lady Beatrice Calloway. Genevieve Jenny Fairview stood in the center of the Persian rug. Her dress was a simple grey muslin, darned at the hem, a stark contrast to the velvet and silk surrounding her. She kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her to stop them from shaking. Sitting in the leather wingback chair was Justin Wycliffe. He was handsome in the way a statue is handsome, chiseled, polished, and utterly cold. He didn't even have the decency to stand. "It's simply a matter of economics, Jenny," Justin said, swirling the brandy in his glass. He refused to meet her eyes, focusing instead on the amber liquid. "My father left the estate in significant debt. I need a wife who brings capital connections. You bring your father's debts and a leaky cottage." From the corner of the room, a soft, cruel laugh echoed. Lady Beatrice Calloway adjusted her shawl. "Oh, don't be so harsh, Justin. She brings her virtue," Beatrice sneered, making the word sound like a disease. "Though virtue hardly pays for the restoration of the West Wing, does it?" Genevieve felt a physical blow to her chest, but her face remained a mask of porcelain calm. She had loved Justin. She had nursed his mother through consumption 3 years ago. She had managed his ledgers when he was too drunk to read them. She had thought they were partners. "I see," Genevieve said. Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the room clearer than a shout. "I'm willing to offer a settlement," Justin said, quickly pulling a pouch of coins from his vest. £50 to help you get settled elsewhere. Perhaps you can find work as a governess in the south. Far away." He was buying her silence. He was buying her disappearance, so he could marry Beatrice without the reminder of his broken promise living down the lane. Genevieve looked at the pouch of coins on the mahogany table. Then she looked at the ring on her finger, a modest garnet band that had belonged to his grandmother. She didn't cry. She knew that tears would only feed Beatrice's vanity. Slowly, deliberately, Genevieve slid the ring off her finger. She placed it next to the pouch of money. She didn't touch the coins. "You will need this more than I, Justin," she said softly. "A man who sells his honor for a new roof is poor indeed." Justin's face flushed a deep crimson. He stood up abruptly. "How dare you? I am being generous. You have nothing, Genevieve. Nothing. Walk out that door, and you are a spinster with no name and no home." Genevieve turned her back on him. She walked to the heavy oak doors. "Leave, then," Justin shouted, his guilt morphing into rage. "Walk home in the rain. See if your pride keeps you warm." Genevieve opened the door and stepped out. She didn't look back. The rain was torrential. It soaked through her thin dress in seconds, chilling her to the bone. She had no umbrella, no carriage, and nowhere to go. Her father's cottage had been sold to the bank just yesterday. Justin knew that. He had kicked her out on the very day she became homeless. She walked down the long gravel driveway, the stones cutting into her thin soles. She reached the iron gates of the estate and leaned against the cold metal, gasping for air. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing reality of her situation. She was 22, penniless and alone. "Well, well," a voice sneered from the gatehouse. It was Mr. Cobb, Justin's groundskeeper. "Looks like the master came to his senses. Off to the poorhouse with you, Miss Fairview." Genevieve straightened her spine. She prepared to walk the 5 miles to the village inn to beg for a night's stay in the stables. But then the ground began to tremble. It wasn't thunder. It was the rhythmic, heavy pounding of hooves, many hooves. Rounding the bend of the misty road wasn't a farmer's cart or a mail coach. It was a carriage. And not just any carriage. It was a monstrosity of black lacquer and gold trim, pulled by 4 of the most magnificent black Frisian horses Genevieve had ever seen. The carriage didn't pass her. The driver, a giant of a man in a livery of deep charcoal and silver, pulled the horses to a halt right in front of the shivering Genevieve. Mr. Cobb dropped his pipe in shock. The door of the carriage flew open. A footman jumped down, splashing into the mud, without a care for his uniform, and bowed low before Genevieve. "Miss Fairview?" the footman asked. "Yes," she stammered, teeth chattering. "His Grace is waiting. His Grace." From the dark interior of the carriage, a gloved hand extended. A masculine hand, large, card and commanding. Genevieve hesitated. She looked back at Wycliffe Manor, where she could see Justin watching from the window. Then she looked at the hand. She took it. As she was pulled up into the warmth of the velvet-lined cabin, the footman shut the door, sealing her away from the rain and the misery of Oakhaven. Justin Wycliffe, watching from the window, went pale. He recognized the crest on the door panel just before the carriage sped away, a silver hawk holding a bleeding rose. "That's not possible," Justin whispered, the glass of brandy slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. "That's the Duke of Ashworth." Inside the carriage, the silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic drumming of the wheels against the wet road. The interior was warmer than any room Genevieve had ever been in. There was a fur rug on the floor, and a small brass heater emitting a steady warmth. Sitting across from her, shrouded in the shadows of the carriage's corner, was a man. Genevieve huddled into the corner, shivering violently. Who are you? Why have you helped me?" The man leaned forward. The light from the passing street lamp illuminated his face. He had dark hair slightly curled at the collar, and eyes the color of a stormy sea gray and piercing. A jagged scar ran from his jawline down into his cravat, giving him a dangerous edge. Genevieve gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Arthur," she breathed. The man's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. "Hello, Jenny. Though I haven't used the name Arthur in 5 years." Genevieve's mind reeled back. 5 years ago, a wounded soldier had been found in the woods near her father's cottage. He had been half dead, delirious with fever, claiming to be a deserter named Arthur. Genevieve, then only 17, had hidden him in their barn. She had stolen bandages and broth from her own meager supplies to nurse him back to health. He had stayed for 2 months. They had talked about everything: books, philosophy, the stars. And then one morning he was gone, leaving only a note that said, "I shall repay this debt." You are the Duke of Ashworth?" she asked, disbelief coloring her tone. Stellan Montgomery, he corrected gently. But yes, when you found me, I wasn't a deserter. I was hiding from my uncle's assassins who wanted the title before I could claim it. You saved my life, Genny. He reached into a compartment and pulled out a thick wool blanket, draping it over her wet shoulders himself. His hands lingered for a moment, warm and strong. I have kept watch over you, Stellan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming harder. I had agents in Oakhaven. I knew your father passed. I knew about the engagement to Wycliffe. I stayed away because I thought you were happy. I thought Wycliffe was a good man. Stellan's eyes darkened. But today at noon, my agent sent word that Wycliffe was meeting with the bankers and Lady Beatrice. I knew what he was planning. I left London immediately. You came all this way. For me? Genevieve asked, the tears finally threatening to spill. I would cross hell for you, Genevieve, Stellan said with a quiet intensity that made her heart hammer against her ribs. I told you once in that barn that I would never let harm come to you if I had the power to stop it. I have the power now. He reached across the space and took her cold hand. Wycliffe is a fool, Stellan growled. He traded a queen for a pawn, but his loss is my salvation. If you will have me, Genevieve, you will never be cold or hungry again. You will not go to the poorhouse. You are going to Ashworth Hall. Genevieve looked at this man, this powerful, terrifying duke, who was looking at her with the same soft eyes of the wounded soldier she had once saved. I have nothing to offer you, Stellan, she whispered. My reputation is ruined. I am a cast-off bride. Stellan laughed, a low rumble of a sound. My dear Jenny, by tomorrow morning, you will be the most envied woman in England. Let them talk. I intend to give them something to talk about. The arrival at Ashworth Hall was overwhelming. The estate was not merely a house. It was a palace of limestone and glass, lit by hundreds of lanterns that cut through the night. Stellan didn't take her to the servants' entrance. He marched her right through the front double doors, where a line of 20 staff members stood at attention. This is Miss Fairview, Stellan announced, his voice booming through the marble foyer. She is my honored guest. She is to be treated with the same respect you would accord a duchess. Is that clear? Yes, your grace, the chorus of voices replied. Stellan turned to an elderly woman with kind eyes. Mrs. Higgins, please prepare the sapphire suite. Draw a hot bath and burn that grey dress. Have the modiste from London here by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is Sunday, your grace, Mrs. Higgins noted. I don't care if it is the apocalypse, Stellan said calmly. Pay her triple. Get her here. For the next week, Genevieve lived in a blur. She wasn't just given a room. She was given a wing of the castle. She was fed rich stews, fresh fruits, and desserts she couldn't pronounce. But the most shocking moment came 3 days later. Genevieve was sitting in the library, reading by the fire, wearing a new gown of deep blue velvet that matched Stellan's eyes. Stellan entered, looking grim. He was holding a newspaper, the London Gazette. Read this, he said, handing it to her. Genevieve looked at the society column. Scandal in Oakhaven. Mr. Justin Wycliffe announces engagement to Lady Beatrice Calloway, merely hours after ending his betrothal to Miss G. Fairview. Sources say Miss Fairview fled the parish in disgrace. They are spinning lies, Genevieve said, her hands trembling. They are making it sound as if I ran away. They are controlling the narrative, Stellan said. He sat down opposite her. But we are going to break it. Tonight is the Earl of Stirling's masquerade ball in London. Everyone will be there, including Wycliffe and Beatrice. Genevieve shrank back. I can't go, I can't face them." "You won't face them as the cast-off fiancé," Stellan said, leaning forward, his eyes blazing. "You will face them as my partner." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it. Inside lay a necklace of diamonds and sapphires, so large it made her gasp. The center stone was the size of a quail's egg. "This is the Ashworth sapphire," Stellan said. "My mother wore it. My grandmother wore it. No woman has worn it in 30 years. Stellan, I cannot wear family heirlooms. It implies exactly what I want it to imply," he cut in. "Genevieve Wycliffe broke you because he thought you had no value. Tonight we show him that he couldn't afford you even if he had all the gold in the world." He stood up and offered his hand. "Trust me, Genny. Will you walk into the lion's den with me?" Genevieve looked at the necklace, then at the man who had saved her. She thought of Beatrice's sneer. She thought of Justin's pitying £50. A fire ignited in her belly, a fire she hadn't felt in years. "Yes," she said, "I will." The London townhouse of the Earl of Stirling was a frenzy of silk powder and gossip. It was the first major event of the season, and the ballroom was packed with the crème de la crème of British society. In the center of the room, standing beneath a massive crystal chandelier, Justin Wycliffe held a glass of champagne. He looked dashing, or so he told himself, though his eyes kept darting toward the entrance. Clinging to his arm was Lady Beatrice Calloway, dressed in a gown of crimson silk that was slightly too tight and entirely too low cut for a woman of her standing. "Stop fidgeting, Justin," Beatrice hissed behind her fan. "You look guilty." "I'm not guilty," Justin snapped, though the sweat on his brow suggested otherwise. I heard a rumor at the club. They say the Duke of Ashworth is in town." Beatrice laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "The recluse of the North. He hasn't attended a ball in 5 years. He hates society. He's probably rotting away in that fortress of his. And speaking of rotting," she added loudly, ensuring the nearby circle of debutantes could hear, "have you heard about poor Miss Fairview? I hear she was seen begging for a ride on a turnip cart. Such a tragic end for a girl with such limited prospects." The circle tittered. Justin forced a smile, but his stomach turned. He pushed down the memory of Genevieve's quiet dignity as she left his house. Suddenly the music stopped. It wasn't a gradual fade. The orchestra cut off abruptly mid-measure. The chatter in the room died down, replaced by a confused murmur. All eyes turned toward the grand staircase, the major domo. A man usually known for his booming voice looked pale. He struck his staff against the floor, his hand trembling slightly. "His Grace the Duke of Ashworth." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The recluse was here. "And—" the majordomo paused, squinting at the card in his hand, as if he couldn't believe what was written there. "And his guest, Miss Genevieve Fairview." If the room had been quiet before, it was now silent as a grave. At the top of the stairs, Stellan appeared. He was dressed in severe black formal wear, the starkness of it broken only by the sash of the Order of the Garter across his chest. He looked like a predator among sheep, dark, dangerous, and impossibly regal. But no one was looking at the Duke. On his arm was Genevieve. She was unrecognizable from the girl in the grey muslin dress. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that shimmered like the night sky. The cut was modest, yet devastatingly elegant, hugging her figure before flaring out in a train of silver embroidery. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, woven with pearls. But it was her neck that made the dowagers faint. Resting against her skin was the Ashworth sapphire. It blazed under the chandelier light, a stone of such magnitude that it was rumored to be cursed because men killed to possess it. "Breathe," Stellan whispered to her, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Head high. You are the queen of this board." Genevieve gripped his arm. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but she looked down into the sea of faces and saw Justin. She saw his mouth hanging open. She saw Beatrice turn a shade of puce that clashed horribly with her crimson dress. A strange calm washed over her. He discarded me, she thought. He threw me away like rubbish. And now he looks at me as if I am a ghost. She lifted her chin. "Ready," she whispered. They descended the stairs. Every step was a declaration of war. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as they reached the floor. Stellan did not stop to greet the Earl or the Countesses. He walked Genevieve straight through the center of the room. They stopped directly in front of Justin and Beatrice. The silence was deafening. "Wycliffe," Stellan said. His voice was conversational, yet it carried a weight that made Justin's knees weak. "I believe you know my companion." Justin stuttered. Genevieve, is that you?" Genevieve looked at him. Really looked at him. Without the lens of love and gratitude, she saw him for what he was, a weak man in an expensive coat. "Good evening, Justin," she said coolly. "Lady Beatrice, I trust the restoration of the West Wing is going well." The crowd, sensing blood, leaned in. Beatrice recovered first. Her eyes darted to the sapphire greed warring with fury. Well, it seems you found a new protector quickly, Miss Fairview. I didn't realize the position of mistress came with such baubles." The insult hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Stellan didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Careful, Lady Beatrice," Stellan said softly. "You are speaking to the future Duchess of Ashworth." The glass of champagne slipped from Justin's hand and shattered on the floor. The declaration sent a shock wave through the room that was almost physical. Future Duchess. Stellan didn't give them time to recover. The orchestra, sensing the Duke's mood, hurriedly began a waltz. "Dance with me," Stellan said, sweeping Genevieve onto the floor before she could process what he had just said. As they spun into the center of the room, Genevieve looked up at him, panic in her eyes. "Stellan, you cannot say such things. A marriage proposal is... We haven't even..." "It was the only way to silence her," Stellan said, his hand firm on her waist. "And besides, would it be so terrible?" Genevieve looked at him. He was saving her, yes. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she remembered from the wounded soldier in her barn. "You don't have to marry me to save me, Stellan," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "I want to marry you because you are the only woman who ever saw me when I was nothing but a dying man in the mud. You loved me when I had nothing, Jenny. Do you think I care about their titles?" Before she could answer, the rotation of the dance brought them near the edge of the crowd. "May I cut in?" The voice was desperate. It was Justin. By all rules of etiquette, one does not cut in on a duke. It was social suicide. But Justin looked like a man possessed. Stellan stopped dancing. He looked down at Justin with disdain. "You have no right to ask, Wycliffe." "I have every right," Justin said, his voice trembling. "She was mine first. I need to speak with her. Alone." Stellan looked at Genevieve. "It is your choice, my dear." Genevieve stepped back from Stellan. She needed to do this. She needed to close the door. 5 minutes, Justin. Stellan nodded once and stepped back, crossing his arms. His gaze never left Justin's throat. Justin grabbed Genevieve's arm and pulled her towards the terrace doors, away from the prying eyes. The cold night air hit them a stark contrast to the stifling ballroom. "Jenny, what are you doing?" Justin hissed, pacing back and forth. "Do you know who that man is? He's dangerous. They call him the Butcher of Brussels for what he did in the war. He is the man who picked me up out of the rain when you threw me into it," Genevieve said, her voice steady. "I made a mistake," Justin pleaded. He reached for her hands, but she pulled them away. "I was panicked about the money, Jenny. You know how my father left things. Beatrice has a dowry, but she's cruel. I see that, I see that now. I see the difference between a diamond and a piece of glass." He looked at her with wet, imploring eyes. "Come back to me. I'll break it off with Beatrice tonight. We can elope. We'll figure out the money. Just don't marry him." Genevieve stared at him. A week ago, this offer would have been everything she wanted. Now it sounded pathetic. "You don't want me, Justin," she said sadly. "You want the woman the Duke wants. You only value what another man covets." "That's not true. I love you. You love yourself," she corrected. "And you love your comfort. You sent me away with £50 to starve, Justin. That is not love. That is disposal. I can change." "You already have," she said. "You became a stranger." She turned to leave. "You can't marry him," Justin shouted after her, his voice turning nasty. "You think he loves you? He's buying you. Just like I was buying a roof. We're the same, he and I." Genevieve stopped. She turned back her silhouette, framed by the light of the ballroom. "No, Justin, you are not the same. He offered me his name when I had nothing. You took away my name when I had everything to give." She walked back inside, leaving him alone in the dark. The drive back to the townhouse Stellan was renting for the season was quiet. Genevieve was exhausted, the adrenaline fading into a dull ache. When they arrived, Stellan led her into the study. He poured 2 glasses of sherry. "You held your own," he said, handing her a glass. "I was proud of you." "I felt pity for him," Genevieve admitted, sitting in a leather armchair. "He seemed so small." "Fear makes men small," Stellan said. He walked to his desk and unlocked a drawer. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. "There is something you need to know, Genny. Something about why I was in Oakhaven that day I came for you." Genevieve frowned. "You said you came because you heard about the breakup." "I did, but I was already planning to come to Oakhaven the following week, for a different reason." He placed the ledger on the table in front of her. "What is this?" she asked. "This is the master ledger for the Bank of Northern England," Stellan explained. 6 months ago I bought the bank." Genevieve looked at him confused. "Why?" "Because I was looking for leverage," Stellan said, his face hardening. Justin mentioned his father's debts. He claimed that was why he had to marry Beatrice, because he needed her dowry to pay off the mortgages on Wycliffe Manor. "Yes," Genevieve nodded. "The estate is heavily leveraged." Stellan tapped the book. "I bought those mortgages, Jenny. Every single one of them. I own the debt on Wycliffe Manor." Genevieve's eyes widened. You own his house." "I bought them anonymously," Stellan continued. "My intention was to come to your wedding. I was going to present the paid-off deeds to Justin as a wedding gift. For you. So that you would be safe, and you wouldn't have to worry about money, and you could live happily." Genevieve covered her mouth. He had done this for her. He was going to give his rival a fortune just to ensure her happiness. But Stellan's voice dropped, becoming ice-cold. Then I received the report that he had cast you out, that he broke your heart to marry Beatrice Calloway for money. He walked over to the fireplace and stared into the flames. The irony is delicious, is it not? He left you to find money to pay a debt that I had already decided to forgive. If he had stayed true to you for one more week, he would have been a free man. Genevieve looked at the ledger. The tragedy of it was suffocating. Justin's greed had been his absolute undoing. So, Genevieve whispered, what happens now? Stellan turned to face her. The firelight danced on his scar. Now the debt is due. I am calling in the loan, Genevieve. I am foreclosing on Wycliffe Manor. Stellan, he threw you into the rain, Stellan said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. He made you homeless. It is only fitting that he understands exactly how that feels. But Beatrice, Genevieve said, her dowry. Beatrice's father is a gambler, Stellan revealed, dropping the final bombshell. I looked into her finances too. The Calloway fortune is smoke and mirrors. Her dowry exists on paper, but in reality it's tied up in lawsuits. Justin married a pauper to save himself from a debt held by the man who loves his ex-fiancé. Stellan knelt before Genevieve's chair. He took her hands. I have the power to destroy him, Jenny. To take his home, his lands, his legacy. He will be on the street within a fortnight. He looked deep into her eyes. But the debt was bought for you. So the choice is yours. Do I destroy Justin Wycliffe, or do we show him mercy? Genevieve looked down at the ledger. She thought of the cold rain. She thought of Mr. Cobb sneering at her. She thought of Justin's face on the terrace, blaming her for his weakness. But she also thought of who she was. She wasn't Beatrice. She wasn't cruel. She took a deep breath. I want to go back to Oakhaven, she said softly. I want to deliver the news myself. 3 days later, the carriage with the silver hawk crest rolled through the iron gates of Wycliffe Manor. The weather seemed to have trapped itself in a loop. A grey, heavy drizzle blanketed Oakhaven, turning the familiar roads into sludge. But this time, Genevieve was not walking through the mud. She was watching it fly past the window from the comfort of silk cushions. Are you nervous? Stellan asked. He was dressed not in formal wear, but in a riding coat of charcoal wool, looking every inch the imposing landlord. No, Genevieve said, smoothing the skirt of her traveling dress, a rich burgundy that made her look like royalty. I'm not nervous. I am finished. Inside the manor, chaos reigned. Justin was in the middle of a heated argument with Mr. Thaddeus, the local butcher, who was refusing to extend credit for the upcoming engagement dinner. Lady Beatrice was screaming at a maid for scorching her lace. I tell you the money is coming, Justin shouted, rubbing his temples. Once the marriage settlements are finalized next month, there will be no settlements, Wycliffe. The voice boomed from the doorway. The heavy oak doors had swung open, and standing there, flanked by 2 footmen, were the Duke of Ashworth and the woman Oakhaven thought had vanished into oblivion. Mr. Thaddeus dropped his ledger. The maid curtsied so low, she nearly fell over. Justin went white. Your Grace. And Genevieve. Beatrice stomped forward, her face flushed. How dare you barge in here? This is a private residence. Is it? Stellan asked, stepping into the room. He walked with a predator's grace, scanning the peeling wallpaper and the damp patches on the ceiling. I was under the impression that this residence belongs to the bank, and since I own the bank, I believe I am merely inspecting my property." "What are you talking about?" Justin demanded, his voice cracking. "I have an agreement with the bank I have until the end of the year. The bank has new management," Stellan said calmly. He pulled the thick ledger from under his arm and slammed it onto the mahogany table, the same table where Genevieve had left her ring. "And the new management has decided to call in all high-risk loans, immediately." Justin rushed to the table, staring at the documents. You bought the debt. Why?" "To give you a choice," Stellan said. He stepped aside, revealing Genevieve. She walked forward. The room went silent. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked powerful. "You told me that this house was worth more than my love, Justin," Genevieve said softly. "You told me that you had to marry Beatrice to save the stones and the mortar. So we are here to see if your calculation was correct." Genevieve reached into her reticule and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. "Stellan bought the debt to gift it to us. Had we married," she lied smoothly, twisting the knife, "this house could have been free and clear. We could have lived here without a penny of debt. But you chose Beatrice." Justin stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You would have paid it off." "It was already paid," Stellan corrected. "But now it is a foreclosure." "You can't do this," Beatrice shrieked. "I am Lady Beatrice Calloway. My father will sue you." Stellan turned his cold grey eyes onto Beatrice. He smiled, and it was terrifying. "Ah, yes. Lord Calloway. I assume you are referring to the dowry Justin is expecting. The £10,000. "Yes," Justin cried, grasping at a lifeline. "The dowry will cover the immediate interest I can pay you, Your Grace. Just give me a month." Stellan laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Tell him, Lady Beatrice," Stellan urged. "Or shall I?" Beatrice froze. Her defiance crumbled into panic. "Tell me what?" Justin asked, looking between them. "Lord Calloway hasn't had £10,000 since 1895, Stellan revealed. "He has been borrowing from moneylenders in London to keep up appearances. There is no dowry, Justin. There is only more debt. You married a pauper to save yourself from poverty." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Justin turned to Beatrice. "Is this true?" Beatrice burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. "Papa said he would win it back at the tables he promised." Justin staggered back, hitting the wall. He slid down it, burying his head in his hands. He had thrown away the love of his life, a woman who, through the Duke, held the keys to his salvation. And he had done it for a lie. He had traded a diamond for a stone, just as the prophecy foretold. Genevieve looked down at the man she had once thought was her entire world. He looked pathetic, broken. "Get up, Justin," she said. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Jenny, please, I didn't know. I was a fool. I am ruined. If you take the house, I have nowhere to go. I will be on the streets." "Like you sent me to the streets?" she asked. Justin flinched. "Yes, I deserve it. I know I deserve it." Genevieve looked around the drawing room. This room where she had been humiliated. This house that had consumed Justin's soul. "I am taking the house," Genevieve announced. Justin sobbed. Beatrice wailed. "However," Genevieve continued, her voice cutting through the noise, "I am not you, Justin. I do not send people into the rain without a word." She walked over to the window and pointed toward the edge of the estate. "The groundskeeper's cottage," she said. "The one with the leaking roof. The one where Mr. Cobb lives." "Cobb?" Justin asked, confused. "I am promoting Mr. Cobb. He will live in the main house to manage the estate for me. Genevieve said. You, Justin, may live in the cottage. You will work the land. You will pay rent. And you will learn for the first time in your life what it means to earn your keep. Justin stared at her. You want me to be your tenant on my own land. It is not your land anymore, Stellan reminded him sharply, and it is a generous offer, more generous than the £50 you offered her. Justin looked at Beatrice, and she can join you if she wishes, Genevieve said, though I suspect a leaking cottage is not to Lady Beatrice's taste. Beatrice stood up, wiping her eyes. Live in a hovel with a bankrupt, I think not. She looked at Justin with pure venom. I'm going back to London. Don't expect me to write. She stormed out of the room, leaving Justin alone in the wreckage of his life. Justin looked at Genevieve. He saw the strength in her jaw, the kindness that still lingered in her eyes, despite his cruelty. He realized then that he had never really known her. He had only known what she could do for him. Thank you, he whispered, his head bowing in shame. Genevieve nodded once. She turned to Stellan. Take me home, she said. The sky over Oakhaven was the color of a bruised plum, swollen with rain, that refused to fall. It was a suffocating, heavy afternoon, the kind that made the air feel thick enough to choke on. 3 days had passed since the masquerade ball in London, but for Genevieve it felt like a lifetime. She sat inside the Ashworth carriage, her fingers tracing the velvet piping of the seat. Outside the window, the familiar twisting lanes of the parish rolled by. Every tree, every stone wall, every pothole was a memory. But the last time she had seen these roads, she had been walking them in thin soles, shivering with her life in ruins behind her. Now she was returning in a carriage that cost more than the entire village combined. You are quiet, Stellan said. He was sitting opposite her, watching her with that intense, hawk-like gaze that missed nothing. He wasn't wearing his formal London attire today. He was dressed for business, a severe coat of charcoal wool high boots, and no jewelry other than the signet ring of his dukedom. He looked less like a suitor, and more like an executioner. I am remembering, Genevieve said softly, looking out at the barren fields. I am remembering how cold I was, how loud the silence was when I walked away. Stellan reached across the gap, covering her gloved hand with his large, warm one. You will never feel that cold again, Jenny. I promised you. The carriage slowed as they approached the iron gates of Wycliffe Manor. The metal was rusting the Wycliffe crest, tarnished by years of neglect. Standing by the gatehouse was Mr. Cobb, the groundskeeper, who had sneered at her exit, as the massive black Frisian horses stomped to a halt so the footman could open the gate. Mr. Cobb stepped out, a pipe in his mouth, ready to yell at the intruder. When he saw the ducal crest, the silver hawk, and the bleeding rose, the pipe fell from his lips and shattered on the cobblestones. He scrambled to unlatch the gate, bowing so low his nose nearly brushed the mud. Genevieve didn't look at him. She didn't need to. He was a ghost of a past life. The carriage rolled up the long gravel drive. The manor loomed ahead. It was a beautiful house in theory. Georgian architecture, symmetry, grandeur. But up close the cracks were visible. The ivy was overgrown, choking the brickwork. The paint on the window frames was peeling like dead skin. It was a house dying of pride. The footman opened the door, and Stellan stepped out first. He turned, offering his hand to Genevieve. As she descended, the wind whipped at her cloak. She was wearing a travelling dress of deep burgundy velvet, the colour of old wine, with a high collar and a structured bodice that acted as armour. She felt strong. Ready? Stellan asked, his voice a low rumble. Yes, she breathed. They didn't knock. The footman threw open the heavy oak double doors, and Genevieve and Stellan stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of damp wool beeswax and stale cigar smoke. But louder than the smell was the sound of screaming. It was coming from the drawing room, the very room where Genevieve had been discarded. "Tell you the butcher is refusing to send the roast," a woman's voice shrieked. It was Lady Beatrice. "How are we to host an engagement dinner with no meat, Justin? Are we to serve them boiled cabbage like peasants? I am handling it." "Beatrice," Justin's voice cracked with stress. "Stop harping on me. The settlement money is tied up in the lawyers' offices. I told you once we are married, the funds will release. Well, hurry it up. This house is a drafty tomb, and I am freezing." Genevieve exchanged a look with Stellan. He offered a small, grim smile and gestured for her to lead the way. They walked down the hallway, the sound of their boots echoing on the marble. They reached the open doors of the drawing room. Justin was standing by the fireplace, his hair disheveled, his cravat untied. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Beatrice was draped across the chaise longue, aggressively fanning herself despite her complaints of the cold. "Excuse me," Genevieve said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the argument like a guillotine blade. Justin spun around. He froze. His eyes went wide, darting from Genevieve to the towering, dark figure of the Duke standing behind her. "Genevieve," he whispered, as if seeing an apparition. Beatrice sat up, her fan snapping shut. Her face went through a complex gymnastics of emotions: shock, recognition, jealousy, and finally indignation. "You—" Beatrice spat, standing up. "What are you doing here? Did you come to beg for your job back? I'm afraid the position of housekeeper has been filled." Stellan stepped into the room. He didn't speak immediately. He just walked to the center of the Persian rug, his presence dominating the space so completely that the air seemed to leave the room. He looked at the peeling wallpaper. He looked at the water stain on the ceiling. He looked at Justin with an expression of profound boredom. "Mr. Wycliffe," Stellan said, his voice smooth and cold as polished ice. "Lady Beatrice, I apologize for the intrusion, but I found myself in the neighborhood, inspecting my assets." "Your assets?" Justin stammered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. I don't understand, Your Grace. This is Wycliffe Manor." "Is it?" Stellan asked. He walked over to the mahogany table, the same table where the £50 had been insultingly placed days ago. He carried a thick, leather-bound ledger under his arm. With a deliberate heavy thud, he dropped it onto the wood. The sound made Justin jump. "You see, Justin," Stellan began unbuttoning his coat and making himself comfortable. "When a man is as desperate as you were, he makes mistakes. He borrows from banks that sell their debt to larger banks, and eventually all that debt flows into one river." Stellan tapped the ledger with a gloved finger. "I own the Bank of Northern England, Wycliffe, which means I own every mortgage, every lien, and every promissory note attached to this pile of stones." Justin's face drained of all color. He looked like a corpse propped up against the mantel. You bought my debt." "I did." Stellan nodded. "Every penny of it." "But why?" Justin cried out, his voice shrill. "Why would a duke concern himself with my finances?" Genevieve stepped forward. This was her moment. "He bought it for me, Justin," she said. Justin stared at her. "What?" 6 months ago, Genevieve lied, weaving the narrative Stellan had constructed for her. The Duke intended to present the paid-off deeds to us as a wedding gift. He knew how burdened you were by your father's mistakes. He wanted us to be free. He wanted me to be safe. She watched the realization hit Justin like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the back of the armchair to stay upright. "You mean?" Justin gasped, his voice trembling. If I hadn't, if you had waited one more week," Genevieve said, her voice devoid of pity. "If you had simply been a man of honor for 7 more days, this house would be yours, free and clear. You would be wealthy. You would be respected." She let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his stupidity crush him. "But you were impatient," she whispered. "And you were greedy." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice screeched, breaking the spell. She stormed forward, her crimson skirts rustling. "Who cares who holds the paper? My father, Lord Calloway, will settle this. Our dowry is £10,000. We will pay you your little bit of interest, and you can leave us be." Stellan turned his head slowly to look at Beatrice. He looked at her the way one looks at a particularly annoying insect. "Ah, the famous Calloway dowry," Stellan mused. £10,000, a princely sum. "Yes," Beatrice said, lifting her chin. "So take your ledger and get out." Stellan chuckled. It was a dark, dry sound that sent shivers down Genevieve's spine. "Justin," Stellan said, ignoring Beatrice and looking directly at the trembling man. "Have you seen the bank drafts for this dowry? Have you spoken to Lord Calloway's solicitors?" Well, no," Justin admitted, looking terrified. "Lord Calloway said it was a matter of trust among gentlemen." "Trust," Stellan repeated, tasting the word. "An interesting concept, especially coming from Lord Calloway." Stellan opened the ledger. He flipped past the pages detailing Wycliffe's ruin and stopped at a marked page near the back. "I took the liberty of investigating the Calloway assets as well," Stellan said, "since I was acquiring high-risk liabilities." He spun the book around so Justin could read it. "Lord Calloway hasn't had £10,000 since the Diamond Jubilee," Stellan said brutally. "He lost the family fortune at the baccarat tables in Monte Carlo 5 years ago. He is currently surviving on high-interest loans from moneylenders in the East End. In fact, he was banking on your estate, Justin, to provide him with a retirement." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rain beginning to lash against the windows, weeping for the house. Justin stared at the numbers in the book. The red ink, the debts, the emptiness of the promise he had sold his soul for. He looked up at Beatrice. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with horror. "Is this true?" Justin rasped. Beatrice's face crumpled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the ugly, snarling face of a cornered animal. "Papa has a system," she yelled, tears streaming down her face, ruining her powder. "He was going to win it back. He promised me. He just needed a little time, a little collateral to get back to the tables." "Collateral?" Justin roared. The sound was so loud it made Genevieve flinch. "I am the collateral. My house, my land." "You needed money too," Beatrice screamed back. "We were both lying, Justin." "Don't act so high and mighty. You married me for gold. I married you for security. We both got nothing." Justin staggered back, clutching his chest. The reality of his situation was total and absolute. He had thrown away a woman who loved him, a woman who brought with her the friendship and protection of a duke, to marry a shrew whose fortune was a lie. He had traded a diamond for a handful of dust. He looked at Genevieve. He looked at the Ashworth sapphire glowing at her throat, a symbol of the wealth and power he had touched but failed to grasp. He fell to his knees. "Jenny!" He sobbed, his dignity completely shattered. "Jenny, please. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I was desperate." Genevieve looked down at him. She remembered nursing his mother. She remembered balancing his books. She remembered thinking he was the sun and the moon. Now he was just a man in the mud. "I believe you were desperate, Justin," she said quietly. "But desperation is not an excuse for cruelty." "I am ruined." He wept his hands, covering his face. "If you foreclose, where will I go? I have no skills. I have no money. I will be in the workhouse by winter." Beatrice was sobbing on the chaise longue, now realizing her gambit had failed. Stellan stepped forward, closing the ledger with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. "The bank is foreclosing Wycliffe," Stellan stated. "I'm taking possession of the manor, the stables, the contents, and the land, effective immediately." Justin let out a wretched moan. "However," Genevieve interjected. Justin looked up, hope flaring in his wet eyes. "I am not you, Justin," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I do not believe in kicking a dog when it is down, even a dog that bit me." She walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds. "Do you remember the cottage by the creek?" she asked. "The one Mr. Cobb lived in. The one with the leaking roof and the drafty windows." "Yes," Justin whispered. "I am promoting McCobb," Genevieve said. "He will be moving into the main house to manage the estate for me. He deserves a warm bed." She turned back to Justin, her expression steely. "The cottage is vacant. You may live there." "Live in the gardener's cottage?" Justin asked, stunned. "As my tenant," Genevieve clarified. "You will work the fields. You will tend the crops. You will pay rent to the estate. You will learn for the first time in your life the value of labor. You will learn what it feels like to struggle for a roof over your head." Stellan crossed his arms, looking at Justin with a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. "It is a generous offer, Wycliffe. Far more generous than the £50 and the long walk in the rain you gave her." Justin looked at Beatrice. And her." Genevieve glanced at the sobbing woman in the red dress. "She is your fiancé, Justin," Genevieve said coldly. "She is welcome to join you in the cottage, though I suspect Lady Beatrice lacks the fortitude for farm life." Beatrice stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her eyes were full of venom. "Live in a hovel," she spat. "With a bankrupt fool, I think not." She looked at Justin with pure hatred. "I'm going back to London. I will find another fool, one who actually has money." She marched to the door, pausing only to glare at Genevieve. But Genevieve didn't flinch. She just stared back until Beatrice looked away defeated and stormed out into the rain. The front door slammed, shaking the house. Justin remained on his knees. He looked small. He looked free of his illusions, finally. "Thank you," he whispered to the floorboards. "Thank you for the roof." Genevieve looked at him one last time. There was no love left. No hate, even. Just a quiet, distant pity. "Goodbye, Justin," she said. She turned to Stellan and took his arm. "Take me home, Your Grace," she said. "I believe we have overstayed our welcome." Stellan placed his hand over hers, a shield and a promise. "As you wish, my love." They walked out of the drawing room, leaving Justin Wycliffe alone in the silence of the house he had lost, listening to the carriage wheels fade away into the distance. And that is the story of Genevieve and the Duke. In the end, Justin Wycliffe got exactly what he wanted. He kept his connection to the estate, but he lost the only thing that made it a home. It's a powerful reminder that when we trade our integrity for security, we often end up with neither. But what about you? Do you think Genevieve was too kind to Justin? Should she have kicked him out completely, or was making him a tenant? the ultimate revenge. I want to hear your verdict. Type "justice served" in the comments. If you think she did the right thing, or too nice if you would have thrown him to the wolves. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a daily dose of drama. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thanks for watching.